Hi, I'm Randy Patterson, and this is Psychology Salon, a channel looking at various issues from a psychological perspective. Consider clicking the subscribe button below. This post is part of a series of posts to mark the release of the second edition of the Assertiveness Workbook, which is available on Amazon and from any bookstore, either from their stock or by order. When you write a book, you often get requests to appear on radio or television or in podcasts. When the first edition of this book came out, radio was the most common thing I got asked to do. And when you get that call, it's easy to think, oh, I'm going to have an hour to chat about this subject. No, you're sandwiched between the traffic and the weather. Your job is to provide 5 minutes of filler. The producer sits down with you and says, look, we don't have much time, so we really want to get to the one core concept of your book. If they want more, they can buy it. So what can we say is the main point? Well, if you get this book, you'll see that it's a whole series of strategies, over 200 pages of them. So which one is the key point? Even though I'd written the book, I really didn't have a strong sense of that. So I'd stumble through somehow, and then the weather would come on and we'd be done. But as I thought about that, I realized that there is something lurking behind the ideas in the book, like a ghost, or like one of those magic eye 3D posters you used to see that look like a collection of red and blue dots until suddenly an image appears before you. It really is the core of the whole thing. And since I figured that out, that bit of the interview is really easy. And wanting to make the key point more explicit is one of the motivations behind the second edition. But where do you put it? If you're writing a story, you want to save the big reveal for the climax, maybe in the second to last chapter. But when you're teaching a concept, it helps to put it closer to the front because that'll inform all the fiddly little detail that emerges from it. So I put it in the preface, and in the first chapter, and in the third chapter. And I referred back to it for the rest of the book. Now, maybe I should really make you pay the cash and buy the book to find out what it is. Because at one point I say, listen, if you really get this concept, you've got the book. You don't need to read all the rest, which is partly true, but it's also partly a joke because applying the core concept can be challenging, and everything else in the book is designed to help with that. So, really, the key concept is just the beginning, but it's also the end. Here's the deal. Ask anyone why they want to take an assertiveness course or read a book on the topic. Well, I have a really difficult spouse, or daughter, or brother, or parent, or best friend, or maid of honor, or boss, or doctor, or neighbor, or employee, or colleague. They'll say that. And nothing I do seems to have any effect. I need them to change. Okay, change how? Show some respect. Stop having affairs. Get a job. Stop stealing my pens. Move that fence. Return my lawnmower. Keep my secrets. Stop crossing my boundaries. And for God's sake, put the toilet seat down. That's straight out of the preface, if you're wondering. What sparks a desire for better assertiveness skills is the urge to change the world. And that is the problem. You cannot do it. You cannot physically take charge of someone else's behavior and make them do what you want. At least you can't do it if you're being assertive and not aggressive. It's like being in a car on a crowded highway and trying to make that person up ahead in the blue car pick a lane and stick to it. You only have your steering wheel, your accelerator, your controls. You don't have his. The only car you have control over really is your own. And that's the key. Assertiveness is not about controlling other people. It's about controlling yourself. your own actions, not theirs. So long as you're focused on the other person's behavior, the other person's steps in the dance, you're stuck. You're only going to try to make them change. And human beings like to have control over their own lives. If you try to take that control, even though you really can't, they will resist. They'll dig in and they won't move an inch. Maybe you've had this experience. You're arguing with someone, trying to get them to change their mind, and their position only gets more extreme. And they wind up occupying this completely irrational position at the far end of reality because you tried to drag them back to earth. So that's a bit disappointing, but it is the key to assertive behavior. So long as you're trying to make them change, you're stuck. The key is to change yourself instead. Sometimes people think, yeah, but the other person really is the problem. They're the one that's being unreasonable or irresponsible or entitled. They need to change. This isn't my fault. No judge in the world is going to lay this one at my door. And that holds people back from looking at themselves. The thing is, they're often right. That other person really is unreasonable. But this isn't a court of law. This is reality. And the reality is you cannot control other people. You can only control yourself. Justice has nothing to do with it. Now, does this mean we're just giving up? No. One of the groups of people I see are families where a young adult is sitting at home playing video games, not helping around the house, not employed, not going to school, nothing. And the parents are trying to make him change. I say him because this is way more common amongst young men than young women. So the parents are nagging him to start helping around the house, apply for jobs, go back to school, stop sitting on the computer, whatever. And it never works. But they keep doing it anyway. So, assertiveness isn't about controlling other people. It's about controlling yourself. Great, but does that mean they have to just sit and forget all about this situation improving? No. The way to improve it is to focus on their own behavior. How would you do that? Well, long story, but I'll give you an obvious example. A young adult who's so focused on the internet that he won't come to the dining table for food. So his parents are making up food trays morning, noon, and night and taking it up to him. And they're really frustrated. They're trying to make him turn off the computer and come down for his meals. But that's not going anywhere. Now, believe me, I know this is an obvious one. What they needed to do was stop trying to make him change and change their own behavior instead. They needed to be clear with him that they weren't going to deliver food to his room, and they needed to stop. And they needed to let him make his own decision about what to do about that. Now, whenever I give that example, people say, well, what if he doesn't eat and starves himself to death? Well, obviously, there'd be some warning that that was happening, and we could rethink and do it more gradually and change the parent's approach in some other way. The point is that trying to change him against his will was never going to work. So this key concept plays out in every aspect of assertiveness, from giving your opinion to getting criticism to making requests to saying no. It's always about what your role in the dance is and how you can change your steps. Not because the whole situation is your fault, but because you can only change what you do, not what they do. And in over 200 pages in the Assertiveness Workbook, I show you how to do just that, how to change yourself in a way that changes the situation as a whole. Now, It's very much an ecological way of viewing things. And by that, I don't mean green environmentalism, though, full disclosure, I am completely an environmentalist. But I'm talking about ecology the way we talked about it before climate change became the only topic of conversation. When you change one aspect of an ecosystem, you wind up changing others. Introduce deer to an island, and you change the foliage on that island. Wipe out wolves, and you wind up with diseased deer that live long enough to infect other deer. Change anything, and the whole ecosystem changes. Change one person in a family, and the family system changes. Not always perfectly, not always in quite the way you'd expect, but one thing you cannot do is make someone else change directly if they do not want to change. You can change the ecosystem, and they will have to adapt to it. I'll give you another example. A mother I once knew was frustrated that her adult son, who had a job, was still expecting her to pay his cell phone bill. She was waiting for him to come to her and request that she not pay it off every month. And he hadn't done that. And best guess was he was never going to do that. She needed to change her end of the bargain instead. She needed to have a nice, pleasant conversation with him where she expressed her appreciation for him and his new job, and where she said that now that he was grown up, his cell phone was really his own, and that she wouldn't be paying his bill. No hostility, no aggression, no anger, just a kind, pleasant description of how she was changing her own behavior. She was worried that he'd be careless and get behind and not pay his bills and have his phone cut off, which isn't a disaster. And what he did about that would be up to him. Now, those are just two examples, but how does this play out in married couples? How does it play out in workplaces where one person really is the boss? How does it play out when you're requesting someone else do something? Does this key concept still apply? Yes. And it takes me a book to show you how. I have some more videos on specific bits though, so stay tuned. Thanks for watching, and remember, the Assertiveness Workbook 2nd edition is available from all major booksellers, online and brick and mortar. And if you're a clinician, I have training programs to help you learn how to use assertiveness training in your own work with clients. Check out randypatterson.com, Patterson with 1 T, for information and updates. You can also find courses on various topics on psychologysalon.teachable.com.